Hey, it's Ryan, and I'm glad that you're here. I've been looking forward to this episode for a while now. Not just because it kicks off something new, but because, well, this time of year is my absolute favorite. There's something about fall that just hits differently. The warm afternoons that fade into crisp evenings. That first morning when you can see your breath. Football on Sundays. Halloween decorations in the yard. The smell of firewood, the return of flannel, and the slower rhythm after the chaos of summer fades away. It's like the world finally exhales. And in that space, in that stillness, we get a chance to think, to reflect, to finally ask ourselves the kinds of questions we usually outrun during the rush of day-to-day life. And that's what this podcast series is all about. We're calling it Campfire Conversations. Not because we'll literally be sitting around a fire, though if you are, bonus points for you, but because I want these episodes to feel like the kinds of conversations that happen around a fire. When you're not in a rush, when no one's checking their phone, and when the truth can finally find its way to the surface. These next several weeks won't be about hot takes, headlines, or market forecasts. They'll be about what money really means to us, beneath the statements, the spreadsheets, and the performance metrics. And today, we're starting with one of the most personal topics of all, the stories we tell ourselves about money. Now, I don't mean the numbers, I mean the story. That quiet, often unspoken narrative that's been shaping your decisions for years. The one that plays in your head when you check your bank account, or talk to your spouse, or compare yourself to your friends. You might not even realize you have one, but you do. We all do. I'll tell you a story. Actually, it's two stories, different outcomes, but the same root. A few years ago, I worked with a couple who were successful by almost any measure. High income, beautiful home, a couple vacation properties. From the outside, they looked like they had it all together. But in our meetings, I could sense it. They were terrified. Terrified of losing it. Terrified of not keeping up. They were constantly comparing themselves to people in their circle who had more. A nicer second home, a faster boat, kids in more expensive colleges. And at some point I just asked them, what's the finish line here? How are you going to know when enough is enough? And they just looked at me, no answer. That was the moment we realized that they weren't building wealth. They were trying to outrun a story. And here's what I mean by that. Somewhere along the way, maybe growing up, maybe early in their careers, they picked up the belief that safety only comes from more. More money, more success, more distance between them and the version of themselves that they used to be, or the version they never want to be. Their story said, if we all stay ahead, we'll fall behind. If we stop growing, we're slipping. If someone else has more, we must be missing something. And so they ran hard. They worked long hours, stressed over every market dip, said yes to things they didn't really enjoy just to keep up their appearance. They weren't chasing a number. They were trying to silence a fear. But here's the thing about those kinds of stories. You can't outrun them because they're not out there. They're in here. They live in your nervous system, in your insecurities, in that little voice that tells you you're only as good as your next big win. And unless you name that voice, unless you examine where that belief came from, it will keep you running. Even after you've made it. Even after you're technically okay. And what's worse, you might miss the whole point of why you were working so hard in the first place. Because what started as a desire for freedom becomes a trap. What started as motivation becomes anxiety. And what started as ambition becomes never enoughness. And that's the power of a money story left unexamined. Now, not everyone's story is about running to stay ahead. Some people carry a very different one, the opposite even. I've never been good with money. I don't deserve to be wealthy. People like me, we just don't get ahead. We'll talk more about that story in a bit, but I wanted to stay with this one, the one that hides behind success because it's real and it's common. Now, you might be listening to this and thinking, it sounds like me. I'm doing well, but doesn't feel like I'm doing that well. I keep moving the goalposts. I thought I'd feel different by now. And if that's you, you're not broken. You're just following a script that was handed to you. One that maybe served you once, but doesn't have to keep running the show. Because here's the truth. More isn't always better. Better is better. And sometimes better starts with the conversation. Not about your portfolio or your rate of return, but about your story. The one that's been whispering to you since you were a kid. The one that might still be driving the bus, even if you feel like you're the one that's holding the wheel. So the question is, what's your story? And is it still serving you? Because the truth is, not everyone is running to stay ahead. Some people are standing still, afraid to even move at all. I remember working with a guy. He was in his early 50s, self-employed, kind of a quiet guy. He reached out to us for help, but you could tell he had almost talked himself out of it half a dozen times. When we sat down, the first thing he said is, look, I'm not one of your big clients. I know I probably should have done more by now, but I've just never really been good with money. And he said it like it was a confession, like walking through the door was some kind of a punishment for him. So I asked him to help me understand his situation a little bit. What did he want? What kept him up at night? What he was hoping that we could help him with. And when I looked at the numbers, he was actually doing pretty well. He didn't have millions sitting in brokerage accounts, but he had zero debt, a stable business, and a quiet kind of discipline that had clearly added up over the years. He just didn't see it that way because his story said, I'm behind. Other people are doing better. There's a right way to do this, and I think I missed that memo. He carried that story like a weight, one he couldn't name, but one he felt every time he saw someone post about retiring early or buying a second home or making six figures off crypto or something like that. He wasn't trying to outrun a story, he was trying to hide from it. And that's the other side of this coin. Some people build wealth to prove something. Others don't build wealth because they don't believe that they can. Both are rooted in stories that they never actually chose. And that's what makes this conversation so important, because whether your story is fueled by comparison or by shame, by pride or by fear, it's shaping how you save, how you invest, how you spend, and maybe more importantly, how you feel about all of that. And here's the thing, most of these stories don't start with us. They started in childhood or in crisis or in whatever environment first taught us what money actually means. For some, money meant freedom. For others, it meant control. For some, it meant possibility, and for others, it meant pain. You might have been raised in a house where money was everything, or a house where it was never talked about. Maybe you learned that money equals safety, or status, or success, or survival. But here's the truth. You probably didn't choose that story consciously. You absorbed it. You inherited it like a family recipe. Not because it was right, but because it was there. And unless we pause to name it, we end up living by it, on autopilot. Sometimes that looks like overworking. Sometimes it looks like underplanning. Sometimes it's avoidance, and sometimes it's obsession. But underneath it all is the script, the one you didn't write, but may have been reciting for decades now. So here's what I want to offer you this fall. The space to pause, the space to reflect, and maybe the courage to rewrite the next chapter. Not just by adjusting your portfolio, but by adjusting the lens that you see it through. And that's what Campfire Conversations is all about. If this first episode hits home, I'd love to talk. Not in a formal meeting with charts and projections, but a real conversation, one-on-one, where we explore what your story is. And whether you're still okay with it or you're not. You can schedule that conversation through the link in the show notes, or just sit with these questions this week and notice what comes up. Next week, we're going to dig into what happens when we don't face these stories. We'll talk about the cost of avoidance, because sometimes not making a decision is the most expensive decision of all. But until then, thanks for listening. I hope you find a quiet moment this week. I hope you give your story a name. And if you're ready to talk, I'll bring the firewood. Securities and advisory services offered through Commonwealth Financial Network. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. Fixed insurance products and services are separate from and not offered through Commonwealth. The Flanders Group is located at 221 Maitland Street, Bel Air, Maryland 21014. Phone number 410-569-4506. Investments are subject to risk, including the loss of principal. Some investments are not suitable for all investors, and there is no guarantee that any investing goal will be met. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Talk to your financial advisor before making any investing decisions. The client example presented in this podcast is for illustrative purposes only and should not be construed as a recommendation. It may not be representative of your experience.
1, 2,